The third song, Me and You, starts like this. And frankly, this is all you get. So despite what the main melody does, you just get these two riffs that keep repeating throughout the song. They never stop, they never change. It's just played on a loop, and anything else is written on top of these two riffs. Now, that's a pretty easy way to write a song, right? You just pick a couple of chords, a couple of riffs, have it repeat consistently throughout the song, and then all you have to do is fill in the melody. Jay Chou has done this. And I have done this too in the song for Caddy. Remember that? So one advantage of doing this, other than being cheap and easy, is that it will automatically ensure that your entire song is internally consistent. If you write a song with lots of variations where it switches between different chord progressions all the time, then you have to make sure that whatever switches, whatever changes you make actually makes sense in the flow of music. And so you have to be very careful with the music theory. But if you have a simple chord progression that just keeps repeating, then that's automatically taken care of. There can be no changes that sound awkward because there are no changes to begin with. And it also makes the music easy to listen to because once you've heard the first 10 or 20 seconds of the song, you have essentially heard the entire song. Your brain knows exactly what to expect, and it's just going to synchronize to that exact chord progression, and it'll follow along very naturally. On the other hand, if this repeating sequence is too simple, in the case of this song, it actually is very simple. It's like literally two chords. Then the music can potentially sound boring because it just lacks content. But I think in this case, it might actually be intentional to make it so simple and restricted. And I'll come back to this point after talking about the melody part of the song. So the melody part of the song goes something like this. And it generally dances around, but it's these 5 notes that are being used. And then when you get to the chorus, it goes. Again, it's just these 5 notes. In fact, throughout the entire song, the melody heavily dances around just these 5 notes. A sixth note, the G, is also used, but it's used very rarely. And the seventh note, the F, is actually never used in the entire song. This gives the impression that the music was actually written using an alternate reduced scale. So in the sheet music, I'm pretty sure the notation says it's A minor. So this is the scale on the sheet music, but because we're only using these 5 notes, it's as if these two keys aren't even included in the scale. This can really change the feeling or the character of the entire song. So take, for example, the B major scale. And if you remove these 2 notes, you're left with only 5 notes. And that's the pentatonic scale that we've talked about before. So in that case, removing these 2 notes from the B major scale makes it sound Chinese for some odd reason. And what happens if you take the A minor scale and then you remove these 2 notes? You're left with. What does that sound like? Well, if you go by this song as an example, then at least to me, it sounds kind of floaty or ethereal, which, hey, you know what? Actually matches the MV again, where you have the two characters in exactly this kind of floaty, ethereal kind of world. Removing 2 notes from a scale also symbolizes some kind of artificial constraint, as in normally you would be able to do something, but within this piece of music, you're prevented from doing that. And that is also reminiscent of this kind of artificial world that the two characters are living in. Because in this kind of artificial programmed world, you would not expect it to behave exactly like the real world because there are some limitations in the program. And that brings me back to the point I made earlier about the chord progression, the literal two chords that repeat over and over again. That can be seen as another symbol of the kind of limitations that you might experience in an artificial world like this. So, in something like game design, people often talk about something called the gameplay loop, where, for example, you could have a player going out in the game world to gather some resources, use those resources to build better equipment, use the equipment to defeat stronger enemies, and that allows the player to venture further out in the world to gather better resources, to build better equipment, to defeat stronger enemies, and it continues in a loop like that. Whereas in this song, we don't have a gameplay loop, but we have the chord progression loop. And that's symbolic of the kind of experience you might expect when you enter into an artificial world like this, where you might be limited in the types of actions you can take. So, yeah, I know this is the kind of BS I would put in a commentary for Christine Kerr's English class or something like that. But hey, this is how I would interpret the song given the music theory analysis.